Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michelle Foster, the Dean of the Melbourne Law School, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the Law School today for this very important event on talking treaty, truth and justice. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're gathering this afternoon on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to Elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Indigenous people who are joining us this afternoon. Well, we are meeting at an historic juncture in Victoria's and indeed our nation's history. Today's event is a collaboration between the University of Melbourne's Truth and Justice Project in association with the First Peoples Assembly and ANTaR Victoria, and supported by the Faculty of Arts and the Melbourne Law School's Indigenous Law and Justice Hub here at the University of Melbourne. Now, this forum is very timely, with a treaty having been negotiated with the Victorian State Government and, of course, the statewide treaty bill having passed the Legislative Assembly in the Victorian Parliament last week. This, of course, follows the release of the significant Yoorrook Justice Commission's reports in July 2025. And this forum introduces the wider community to the pathway to truth, treaty and justice as integral elements in the evolution of the progress toward treaty. Well, as you can see, we have three wonderful speakers for today's panel, and the panel will be moderated by Professor Nicole Watson, who began her term just last week as the new Director of the Indigenous Law and Justice Hub at Melbourne Law School. Professor Nicole Watson is a member of the Biri Gubba and Mununjali peoples of the Bowen Basin region and Bow Desert, respectively. Nicole's research has focused on laws and policies that affect Indigenous communities and Indigenous peoples' participation in legal education. Nicole has had over 20 years' experience in Australian academia and has joined MLS from the University of Technology, Sydney. We are so happy to have you here at the University, Nicole, and thank you so much for moderating this event. She thought she would ease into her role, but no. I would now like to introduce our first panellist, Rueben Berg, who really doesn't need any introduction. Rueben Berg is a proud Gudjinch Mara man and co-chair of the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria. He sits on the Assembly representing the Eastern Maar Aboriginal Corporation, a traditional owner group of southwestern Victoria. Rueben has worked in Indigenous employment, governance, infrastructure and heritage with the Queensland Government, established his own consulting business and became the first Indigenous chair of Western Portwater. He has been a commissioner for the Victorian Environmental Water Holder and a member of the Heritage Council of Victoria. After Ruben's presentation, Nicole will then introduce our other panellists and facilitate a panel discussion. And the event later will be closed by representatives from ANTaR Victoria, who will share a little about their organisation and offer a vote of thanks. But now it's my great pleasure to welcome Rueben.
Nyapta, hi everybody. As was said, my name's Rueben Berg. I'm a proud Gudjinch Mara man, and it's an absolute pleasure to be able to be here this afternoon on the lands of the Wurundjeri Wurrung peoples, the windy, blowy, very pollen-filled land of the Wurundjeri Wurrung peoples, but want to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and want to just acknowledge other First Nations peoples on the panel here and joining us in this space here. It has been a powerful week, a powerful month, a powerful year, a powerful decade in this treaty-making journey here in Victoria. And so it's very exciting to be able to come and talk to you. And I've been doing a few of these talks so far, more recent times, about the progress we've been making in treaty. And I was mentioning before, one of the biggest challenges I've got at the moment is trying to talk about things in the past tense in terms of we have achieved, because for so long I've been saying our aspiration is this, we're trying to achieve that. But now that we have had the bill passed through Parliament, the first statewide treaty bill in this nation's history passed through the lower house, I can more confidently say that this is what we have achieved in this first statewide treaty. When I talk to people about this journey of treaty making, I think it is really critical to raise the understanding about the length of this journey. This hasn't just happened overnight. This hasn't just popped up out of nowhere. There's been substantial work now across a decade to progress this work of treaty making, particularly in the last 6 years with the work of the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria. And it's important to reinforce what the Assembly is about. We are a democratically elected group of traditional owners from all across the state, chosen by our communities to be their representatives whether that's by our general election process or is selected as the reserve seat holder for our particular traditional owner groups. We are selected as a group of us to represent our community on this journey towards treaty making. So that's been in place now since 2019. So 6 years of a democratically elected group of traditional owners representing our peoples, which is a really powerful base to be building from. There's also been some other key foundational matters put in place. We've had the establishment of the Treaty Authority, and it's very pleasing to see 2 members of the Treaty Authority here joining us this evening, thanks to Jida and Uncle Andrew. And the Treaty Authority is independent facilitator. I didn't say umpire, I said independent facilitator, to oversee the negotiations, to make sure that all parties to the negotiations are acting according to the processes, operating according to appropriate cultural processes as well. So it's a really powerful part of this process of the treaty-making landscape to not only have a democratic elected group of First Peoples in the Assembly, but to have the Treaty Authority led by First Peoples overseeing that process, keeping the state accountable, keeping the Assembly accountable, keeping traditional owner groups accountable in these processes, which is really, really important. We've also had put in place the Treaty Negotiation Framework, which is the rule book for treaty making here in Victoria. And that's a really powerful resource that has guided us on this journey so far, and importantly, specified the different types of treaties that we have here in Victoria. So not only do we have the statewide treaty, which has been the work of the First Peoples Assembly, but we also have really strong processes for traditional owner treaties, which is a process that's happening in parallel to this work. And that's a key part of the story to make sure we're constantly telling that this is not just about this first statewide treaty, this is also about these traditional owner treaties that are happening in parallel. And so far, JARA, based around the Bendigo region, have taken the first main step towards progressing that. But there are many, many more traditional owner groups intending to follow down that pathway so we can see outcomes that traditional owners seek at a local level through treaty making to complement the work of the Assembly at the statewide level. So it's really important to recognise those 2 different approaches we have. Also, as part of that treaty making landscape, we have the Self-Determination Fund, which is a trust overseen by First Peoples to manage resources that have been put in place to support traditional owners on their journey towards treaty making, and long-term has an aspiration to build wealth and prosperity for First Peoples. So those are the key components of the treaty-making landscape that were put in place through legislation from back in 2018. But very early on in our term as the Assembly, we recognised that if we wanted to have proper treaty-making processes, we needed truth-telling as part of that. And so we advocated to the government to establish the Yoorrook Justice Commission, and to their credit, they stepped up and did so. And so it's been a really powerful basis for the work, and I want to acknowledge Commissioner Lovett here, former Commissioner Lovett here, for the powerful work of Yoorrook alongside his fellow commissioners. That has really been the basis for the why of treaty. The statewide treaty is the what, the why is the work of Yoorrook, and that really powerful official public record, the more than 140 recommendations that have come out of that, that's the really powerful basis for the work that we're doing here in Victoria. So all those things are really integral to understand about this treaty-making journey we've been on and will continue to be on here in Victoria. So that brings us to this first statewide treaty, and I deliberately refer to it as the first statewide treaty, not just because it's the first in Australia, but it's because we intend for there to be a second and a third and a fourth. We intend for there to be additional multiple statewide treaties. This is just the starting point of our treaty journey from our perspective for the statewide treaty. Also recognising, as I said before, we've got the traditional owner treaties working in parallel. So for this first statewide treaty, it was really important from our perspective, working with our communities and countless numbers of consultations with our communities, to kind of set the stage, to put in place the building blocks for future aspirations, for future transformation, particularly through this lens of self-determination. And that's been the driving force through all the work that we've done as part of the First Peoples Assembly in this first statewide treaty, is to create a mechanism for self-determination and to reset the relationship between First Peoples and the government. Governments for a long time now, I think, have recognised the importance of self-determination, which at its heart is the simple idea that First Peoples should make decisions about First Peoples matters. But the way government has previously been structured, there have been limitations about what's possible through that process. Because ultimately, things of government tend to have to come back to what does Parliament say, what does a minister say? That's where the ultimate responsibility has always sat. Through this first statewide treaty and through the creation of the Gulong Wau, the tip of the spear, we now have a mechanism to see true self-determination, where the powers of ministers, the powers of government can be transferred across to a First Peoples-led body, still led by a democratically elected group of traditional owners. So a really powerful transformation we're seeing through this first statewide treaty and the creation of the Gulong Wau. And to me, there are a few different components to that. There's the ability now to have this new space, and there's some tangible examples to start with in the transfer of power and responsibilities and functions to this First Peoples-led entity. So within this Gulangwal, this treaty landscape, we will see the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria continue as that democratically elected body, and we'll now have certain functions, key functions around representations. So in this future treaty landscape, we have the Assembly being able to, once a year, make an address to Parliament, to a joint sitting on Parliament, to talk directly to the politicians about what is important to us as First Peoples. The ability, at least twice a year, to meet with Cabinet and talk directly to the ministers about what's important to us as First Peoples. Government then also has a duty to consult and develop guidelines with the future Assembly about how all parts of government intersect and interact with the First Peoples community, so that we can help co-design those processes, so we can ensure that any time government is coming up with policies, programs or initiatives, laws that are going to impact on First Peoples, they don't pick and choose how they consult with First Peoples. We've worked with them to decide how it is we want our voices heard on those matters. And that's really, really critical as part of that transformation process. We've also seen the transfer of some specific rule-making powers across to this future First Peoples Assembly. One of those is around the ability for the future Assembly to make rules regarding the confirmation of Aboriginality process. And this has been something, a cause of concern within our community for some time now, and it's not something that government can tackle. Government can't come up with a solution to that, but we as First Peoples can. So the future Assembly will have the ability to work with our community to come up with the rules about what it means for an organisation to provide that confirmation, to say, yes, this person is recognised as an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person. That power will sit with the future First Peoples Assembly. Doesn't have to go back to a minister, doesn't have to go back to Parliament. We get to make those rules and put them into place. That is true self-determination we're seeing enacted, and that's one example of the future growth that we want to see within that space. There will also be the ability for that future body to make appointments of key Aboriginal roles, particularly in the heritage space. So rather than ministers picking and choosing who they think are the right representatives for First Peoples, it's First Peoples themselves making those decisions. So those are just some of the key things that are being put in place for that future First Peoples Assembly. Alongside that, within the Gulangwal space, as well as the Assembly, we're going to see the creation of the Nyinma Nyanyawara, the accountability mechanism. This is in direct response to work that's been happening for many years now, particularly from the Productivity Commission that did their assessment of the closing the gap processes and really looked at what was working, what wasn't working. Sadly, a lot wasn't working. And a key thing they identified was what we need is an independent, First Peoples-led mechanism that's monitoring government's progress, holding them accountable, telling them what's working, what's not working, and providing tangible recommendations about what should be done to fix things. And that's what the Nyinma Nyanyawara is. It is that independent First Peoples-led accountability mechanism. Not only will it be monitoring government's progress around closing the gap, it will also be looking at the over 140 recommendations from Yoorrook and all other existing government commitments and frameworks that they have in place to make sure that where government has made commitments, there's someone actually watching them and making sure they're fulfilling those commitments and their obligations, which is really powerful. We'll also see within that Gulangwal landscape, we're going to have the Nyurnya Yoorrook Talkuna, ongoing truth-telling. We've seen the power of Yoorrook, of that truth-telling process, but we still know that many members of our community have more truths they want to tell. They want to come forward and share their stories about the impact of colonisation they're still experiencing today. And so the Nyurnya Yoorrook Talkuna will enable that ongoing future truth-telling, and will also facilitate place-based truth-telling conversations, which we think will be a powerful extension of that wonderful work of Yoorrook. Also in that truth-telling space, through the statewide treaty, we've got agreement around the curriculum for public schooling to make sure that from foundation up to year 10, the work of Yoorrook, the official public record, will be seen as a resource for that, and we'll work with our experts in education to ensure that that's embedded within the curriculum for Victorian public schools, which is a really powerful way of making sure that First Peoples history is being heard directly from the story of First Peoples for all Victorian public schools, which is a really powerful initiative as part of that treaty process. There's also scope within that Gulangwal landscape for us to create a First Peoples Institute, a way of building up the skills and knowledge and capabilities of First Peoples, because we know within this treaty-making landscape, there's going to be a whole raft of new roles and opportunities that haven't existed before for First Peoples. So we want to make sure we've got a First Peoples-led mechanism to build up our skills and capabilities to fulfil those roles moving into the future. So many, many different powerful things that are going to sit within that treaty-making landscape. A lot of this is specified within the bill itself, which you would have seen, I mentioned before, has passed through the lower house. That will go into the upper house next week, and we're very confident that it will pass through the upper house next week. That will lead to then the royal assent process. We'll also then have a cultural assent, where later on this year, hopefully by December, we're going to have a huge big celebration to bring together all members of our community, all members of the broader community, to celebrate the first treaty in this nation's history. That's the bill. That's about 300 pages. Go and read that if you'd like. I'm sure some of you have trawled through it already. The bill is a result, though, of the treaty. The treaty is the overarching commitment and obligation. That's about 30 pages, a much more manageable read. I really encourage people to take a look through that. They're both public now. You can go and find the treaty. You can go and find the bill. I encourage you in particular to read the preamble to the treaty. That's a really powerful document that has had a lot of work from our community put into it to describe our journey of the treaty-making process, our aspirations, and it's a shared commitment between ourselves and the state as to what treaty-making might mean here in Victoria. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview about the work we have been doing, and just recognise it has come on the hard work of many, many generations before us. It hasn't just popped up overnight. That's a really key part of that narrative that I really encourage our allies to make sure they're sharing and replicating. And to make sure that you do follow along and see what it is that we are doing as the Assembly, so you can amplify that messaging, amplify the stories that we're sharing, amplify the voices of First Peoples, because a key way to combat some of that misinformation we are seeing out there is to share the right information. And the more it's not just us as First Peoples having to shout out the right information, the more we have our allies elevating that right information, the better impact that's going to have. And that gives me great confidence that not only will we secure this first statewide treaty, but many more treaties to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Rueben. We'll move on now to our panel on truth, treaty and justice. We're very fortunate to have Rueben remaining on our panel, and we have two wonderful speakers joining us, Travis Lovett and Crystal McKinnon. Travis Lovett is a proud Kennet-Mara, Gunditjmara Boandik man. He was recently Deputy Chair and Commissioner of the Yoorrook Justice Commission, Australia's only formal truth-telling process. Travis also shaped Victoria's truth and treaty process and the Closing the Gap strategy, and he led the historic 2025 Walk for Truth from Gunditjmara country to Parliament House. Travis was recently appointed as the inaugural Executive Director of the new Centre for Truth-Telling and Dialogue at this university. Welcome, Travis. Also like to introduce our deadly sister, Crystal McKinnon. Associate Professor McKinnon is an Amatyu Yamatji academic, researcher and community organiser. Associate Professor McKinnon is a historian and a critical Indigenous studies scholar, currently working at the University of Melbourne as an Associate Professor in History, Law and Justice at the School of Social and Political Sciences. Her research work has looked at concepts of Indigenous sovereignty, justice and law, and Indigenous social movements, resistance and protest. Crystal is also the chair of the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service. So once again, we're so privileged to have this wonderful panel with us tonight. So I'll start with you. So Rueben already acknowledged the incredible role in establishing truth of the Yoorrook Justice Commission, but can you tell us about some of the people who participated in the Yoorrook Justice Commission? And I know Rueben mentioned that there were 140 recommendations.
Yes.
In your view, what were some of the most critical recommendations?
Yeah, thank you. And great to be here tonight, and also a blessing to be a part of this with the panel here. Massive process, Yoorrook Justice Commission. I think it's one of the broadest terms of reference that any Royal Commission's ever done. 191 years worth of injustice. So I'll get to the main point of the question, but really just setting the context. 191 years worth of injustice. And we covered areas, normally Royal Commissions get priority areas to look at, like family violence, and these are really important. I don't want to diminish the importance of these, but family violence, disability, I can name all the other Royal Commissions that have ever been done, but our terms of reference was big. We had all of systemic injustice perpetuated against First Peoples in the state of Victoria. So we tried to prioritise and I guess synthesise that as part of our terms of reference. And as Brother Boy Rueben said, we also had to do an official public record on top of that within a 3-year period initially. So a massive terms of reference. Of course we were up for the challenge, but it was hard. How do you work out the thematic areas? So we went with more broadly criminal justice and child protection, health, housing, education, land, sky, water, economic prosperity, political life, access to records, sovereignty. There's a few more anyway, but just wanted to give the context. It was huge as well, but really important that we also wanted a commission that was, whilst it was based in Naarm in Melbourne, we wanted to get out to people. We engaged with more than 9,000 First Peoples. Now some may say, oh, that's not many. But actually, when we're asking people to dig deep and come and share the most traumatic things that have ever happened in their life, some of them historic, but many of them still feeding into the injustices that our people experience today. It's not just history. It's continually happening today. And, we talk about closing the gap data. We talk about overrepresentation, of our people in many different jurisdictions, and also the misinformation that Rueben was talking about before, that our people get everything. Now, we had a process, and our people were in a conundrum. Did they want another Royal Commission? Because Royal Commission Aboriginal deaths in custody, still you'll hear quite prevalent in the media about the recommendations not being done. But it was important to our people also that we had a process where we could be able to call witnesses from government as well. And being the first commission, but also being a First Peoples-led Royal Commission was incredibly important as well. 4 of the 5 commissioners were First Peoples, and that's never been done before either, I guess, in Australia as well. So we also had to find our roles in that, which is really unique, being normally we're the ones answering questions, not actually asking the questions. So that was really unique as well. But really engaging with our people. So getting trust with them that this was not just another process that we're going to come and share their hearts and souls with us, but also the point that we wanted to emphasise and reiterate, that we'd never had a democratically elected body. Did we have organisations and so forth that were elevating and activating our rights as best they can? Yes, and we want to recognise them, the VALs, the VAIs, the VACAs of the world. I can name them all, but we've got no time for that. But really important. So I don't want to diminish the strong contributions, and same with the governance forums across government as well. But we knew that true self-determination wasn't happening. But now we had a democratically elected body to be able to advocate and elevate our people's rights. So when the commission finished, because you only get a certain amount of time with the Royal Commission powers, and this is another, I guess, an opportunity that the ongoing truth-telling model will have to be worked through with the Assembly and Government around what kind of powers it will have, which is an exciting time. We won't get into that today. But really emphasising the point about elevating our people's lived experience by going out to them. Sometimes I always joke about this, and I'll continue to say it, but I don't drink cups of tea. I don't like tea, and but I tell you what, when an elder makes you a cup of tea, you drink that tea. Or not even an elder, but someone as well that you're meeting with. But really being, I guess, open and present and engaged with that particular person in that time, because that's the most important thing, that they want to come forward and they want to share their truths. Again, we are asking them to open deep wounds. Some of them have never spoken about this before. And whether it be land, whether it be stolen gens, whether it be about, unfortunately, the words massacres and genocide that did happen, and we made findings about that. But we're asking people, again, to trust us. And that took time, that took effort. And even the early conversations that I was having with many of the people that I was able to engage with, I was asking them when they were sharing their truths as well, like, what do you want to see different? And they would say to me, well, you get paid the big bucks, bros, you come up with the ideas, and many of us would have heard that, particularly mob, and that was like, for me, it was like, wow, okay, yes, okay, that might be the case, but all our people have been held in a flux of trauma that when we actually asked them, well, what do you want to see different? They'd never really thought about it. Never really had the time to come together to go, you know what, actually no one's ever asked me that. I'm just continually fighting the system or agitating the system to elevate our voice. So again, recognising the 1,500 submissions that First Peoples put into the Commission as well. Again, many people will say that that's not many. But many also people came forward to share generations of trauma that their family had been through. So whilst it may be one submission in a kind of data point of view, there was actually generations of lived experience. We didn't capture our people's stories. We captured our people's lived experience, and we turned their lived experience into recommendations for change and transformation to be negotiated through the treaty process. And you're hearing Ongoing Truth was also a recommendation that we made, as well as the accountability body. And the cheeky Productivity Commission got in before our report. So no, but it's really important that we do that. It's not a competition. I think with all the trauma that I've heard in my life, I try to bring a humour to these things because it's really tough, the work. Like, you know, I'm not here to play victim. Like, it was an important role, but it was incredibly hard sitting there, listening to people. And some of them gave truth over 8 hours. Of course, there was multiple breaks, so we had to be flexible again. Sometimes it was in their house, sometimes it was in the backyard, sometimes it was out on country, sometimes it was in those public hearings where mob felt comfortable to come forward. So we wanted to be agile and flexible and not like every other Royal Commission and go, come to Melbourne and you have to share your truths that way. Also wrapping around the mob social emotional well-being as well. So having counsellors available for them to make sure that there was support around them. I want to be really clear. Did we get it right every time? No, we didn't. We didn't get it right every time, but we tried our hardest to try to really support our people as well. Same as legal representation as well, making sure that our people weren't further entrenching themselves in the justice system or breaching anything around other matters that they were dealing with when they were coming forward and sharing their truth. So making sure we had the program through also through Val's with the Lopshire program who got around and supported our people as well. So I'm probably talking a bit too much here, but the recommendations, again, as Rueben said, 146 recommendations. And the state may go, gee, that's a lot of recommendations. But if you look at the terms of reference around all those streams, it probably averages out to be 7 recommendations per stream. So it's actually not that many. Because if you think about it, we did multiple Royal Commissions into one. Really important, factual and evidentiary. Every single recommendation was fact-checked and so forth as well. I didn't realise these I was going to say colonial processes, which they are, were so like scrutinised and so forth as well, which is also, whilst it was hard at the time going through it, it actually further strengthened the evidence. We extracted from our notices to produce process, which the Royal Commission powers gives you, 10,000 documents from government. And I want to be really clear sitting in here that government knew the whole time this was happening because it was their policy the churches were implementing. It was their policy, child protection, the criminal justice system was implementing as well. Yeah, sorry. I keep going on, but, you know, get the mic. Welcome to our panel. Yeah.
Thank you. Crystal, I'll turn to you now. Why do you think it's taken so long, well over 2 centuries, for Australia to finally get to the point where we're on the cusp of negotiating our first treaty?
I've taken some notes, so bear with me while I look at them, but I just want to say it's a great honour to be asked to sit on a panel with Rueben and Travis, who've, you know, done so much work, and also acknowledging Jida and Uncle Andrew at the back as authority members. It's a great privilege and honour to be asked to speak and support the work of treaty and hopefully get it through the upper house. So yeah, I'm a historian, and yeah, I think it's really important to look to history, both to understand how we got here to the present and to learn from the mistakes of the past, and so we can make the best policies and roadmaps moving forward and make the best possible futures for our mobs. I was thinking about when Rueben was talking about the role of both allies, and also I'm a Yamaji person. I've got you know, links to Wathaurong country, but my bloodlines are not from here. And, you know, I see that as an important distinction in terms of who's negotiating treaty and what my role is as a, you know, a guest on Wurundjeri country to support the work that people are doing in the best way. And I think that's also the roles of non-Indigenous people too. Like, if we really believe in always was what always will be, and sovereignty never ceded, and believe in self-determined futures, then we need to get behind this and support it and, you know, share the information with our family and friends and really get it over the line so that we can have a strong self-determined future in this state at least, and provide a roadmap for other states and territories to follow. Yeah, because I think with other states having it been thrown out, you know, it is a really important time, and it's a juncture, I think, that makes it really crucial that these types of events happen, and that we take the information that we learn here and share it with everybody to make sure that we are tackling things what Rueben was talking about in terms of misinformation and you know, untruths and things like that occur. And, you know, thinking about our role, because I know there's academics in the room, you know, when we're writing Indigenous stories and histories, and to make sure that we are using Indigenous voices and Indigenous voices from this place. And, you know, as Travis was saying, Yoorrook has got, I was going to swear then, thousands and thousands of pages of testimony about, you know, all of these different things. All the Aboriginal community controlled organisations have been, you know, writing these things for a long time. These evidence and these stories and these narratives already exist, and we need to make sure that we're using them so that we are creating research and academic work that can help educate the masses and try and tackle some of the issues that has brought us to this place. To return to why has it taken so long? Like, there is a role of the university and academics who have got, you know, made it take so long because we weren't doing the right work and weren't doing the right types of consultative processes in the works that we do that centre community and, you know, and centre the communities through whose lands we are living on and benefit from. And to say, I'll just sum up quickly, that change takes time, and it takes, you know, people in government, people in boardrooms, people protesting on the streets, people's artwork, music, everything. You know, all of these things work together to create change, and we need it all. We need all of the different movements and different types of work of blackfellas has helped get us here today, and allies supporting that work. You know, as I don't know if Nicole said it, but I can't remember if it was, we were talking about this before, but, you know, to overturn Terra Nullius, it took 200 years, and that was the foundational myth of this country. And, you know, and that was, you know, in the spite of all the evidence that says to the contrary, that Aboriginal people, we all have rights to this place. 200 years it took to do it. And I was thinking about, you know, I think land, when we look at land and the High Court and different decisions that have been made in this place, we can also see why it took so long. You know, the Yoorrook determination, which was incredibly racist, and Justice Olney's decision. You know, what's the right word? The test to show that you have rights to land is, you know, it was a test that was trapped in first contact time, you know, whatever that was, in which varies in each place, but we'll go with 1788 as a talking point. You know, it was determined you have to prove that you still acted and lived and done the things that you did at points of first contact. It's an impossible test to make. And, you know, treaty, I think, provides the ways through which we can redress the violence of these types of determinations and provide ways that people can access land and a whole bunch of other things to make self-determined and strong futures for all the different Indigenous communities here in Victoria, which we will all benefit from. And yeah, and it's an expansive document, and it's got real potential for real change in this place. And yeah, I'll end there.
Rueben, you mentioned before that the crucial next steps after the statewide treaty bill is passed by the Victorian Parliament, but I wonder if you could share with us what you imagine will happen in those crucial first few weeks after this historic moment.
After the
passage of
the bill. Well, I'll probably go and have a donut and a cup of tea and have a break for a minute. Then the hard work will really start. So I think that the challenge is that we've spent 6 years getting to this point here, which is really having just dug a hole and planted a seed. And now we're going to have to spend the next time making that plant grow and flourish. So we're already starting to think about what that means in terms of the passage of the bill means now we're confirmed this process is moving ahead. We'll have to still sign the treaty. That's the key moment still to come. But for me personally, I'm already thinking about what is coming next year, what is coming the year after that. How do we make sure that we can enable Galangwal to set up and hit the ground running so that by November next year, when we do have a state election, the work we've done of the Galangwal and the future treaty space isn't just some idea on a bit of paper. It actually exists, it's already operating, it's already performing its functions well, and is already seen as something that Victorians have pride in. And that's really the focus from my perspective. The bill's done now, even though it's still got to pass through Parliament next week, and the numbers are very strong. We've got strong relationships with the Greens, with the Legalised Cannabis Party, with the Animal Justice Party. We're confident the bill will pass through next week, but then that's when the actual hard work begins. Despite how hard the work has been to get here, that's the next key step, deliver.
Thank you. Travis, I turn to you now.
Timeline, all right.
You mentioned very powerfully that it was so important for First Nations people to have the opportunity to tell their stories. I wonder if you could share with us what lessons, I guess, there are for other Victorians to learn about their history from engaging with those stories and their understanding of the history of this place.
Well, I think as well, I think as well, probably one of the other key parts of the testimonial process that I didn't talk about, which was we opened it up to non-Aboriginal people. And not to diminish our people's voice in this, but also to further provide opportunities for people who had also done their research on their own families of early colonisers who came forward. And there was a few, we actually had a whole hearing day dedicated to the likes of Susanna Henty. So in 1834, the Hentys arrived on the boat called the Thistle in Portland, what is now known as Portland, and that's where the first massacre was in Victoria. So having a family member, a descendant of them, come forward and actually share what their family had done and call it for the truth of what it was, it kind of opened up an opportunity for us to really have a day really dedicated where more actually that inspired actually more people to come forward and actually who have done the research on their families and so forth as well. So there's a pivotal role as well for people to also do their own research, but also to come forward and share their lived experience on what it was like going through the educational system. What did they learn? What did they not? So it wasn't just the deep traumas that their family may have committed or may not have. It was also what could you have benefited from learning a bit more about Aboriginal history, Aboriginal culture, the positives, but also the true history around what really happened. So that's the power in the official public record as well, that truth be told, that Rueben was talking about before, about how do we enshrine that key document and the testimonies and the true history around our people's lived experience in the education system. There's also an opportunity for university to actually have a look at ourselves and our role, and I know that there has been some work done as well around that, but really encouraging people to actually engage in the work of truth-telling, but also read the report, read the recommendations. There's thousands of hours of testimony, and as I said, those recommendations are factually based, with more than 10,000 documents alone just from government to further make sure that those recommendations are, I guess, factual as well. And I want to touch upon, I know I harp on about this, but Aboriginal people don't get everything. And that's a really important point. The government will sell a narrative and people will sell a narrative about us getting everything, but we are the most impoverished people. We've got 15 times more likely to contact homelessness services on our own lands, 22 times more likely to come in contact with the child protection system. There's billions of dollars that this government has made on the back of our lands and our waters that has never been transferred. $88 billion actually in the last 13 years alone. The state government has generated through revenue. $0 directly went to First Peoples. During the gold extracted from these lands and these waters, primarily on Wadawurrung country and Dja Dja Wurrung country, $287 billion. it's billion, not million, dollars have been extracted. First Peoples never received any of that. You know, again, I can keep talking about the data, but the data actually says that we don't get everything, and that's why we are overrepresented. The systems are structurally racist or biased towards our people, and that's why we're in the situation that we are in. But I also want to celebrate the hard work, the dedication that our people, the resistance of not giving up. You know, we want everyone to be proud to have the oldest continuous living culture in the world as ours, because it's ours. You know, we are already proud as blackfellas, but we want everyone to be proud of that. And there's no reason why people can't be proud. Just like there's no reason why we can't be proud to be negotiating a treaty. You know, these mob are elected to negotiate that for us, and how deadly is that? You know, it's so good. We're creating history. We are part of history, all of us, right now, and our children for future generations as well. It's so exciting. And, you know, again, we derive our responsibility from our ancestors who weren't able to be here to witness and be a part of this. But we had long called for truth-telling and long called for treaty. Whilst we recognise the government actually said, yeah, okay, let's actually have deep dialogue about what this would look like. But it wasn't just 10 years ago. It's been 200 years plus of advocacy, of fighting for rights and recognition for our people as well. And we're so close, and we're excited about that. But we've still got, as Rueben said, quite a way to go. But we're up for the challenge. We're up for it, all right. Yeah, look out, government. That was way over a minute.
Crystal, do you think that a treaty can effectively address power imbalances between First Nations peoples and settler Australians?
Yes. I think I had a quote written down actually by you that it's like there is no end point. It's a constant negotiation, which I think is the best types of relationships. It is a negotiation. Nothing's off the table. You know, and it's going to be able to impact all different areas, from cultural practice to education to justice to child removal to food and to regional development and jobs. Like, you know, it's got the potential to create real change. I wanted to touch on something you said, just because what I was saying before about the importance of talking to people. When you mentioned Susanna Henty, she'd been working with Professor Gary Foley, Tony Birch and Gunditjmara activists and incredible humans. I almost amalgamated their names then. Tane Otis Williams and Ricky Onis, and for years, around the fact, you know, that her family is a Henty family and one of the main settler families in Gunditjmara country, and, you know, half the places are named after them. And so it was through working with Indigenous people and having conversations also with their other non-Indigenous friends and whatever that got them to the point to be able to contribute to Yoorrook in a way that then propelled other people to also redress and have a look at their own roles and their own family roles. So I think we should never underestimate those conversations that we can have with people to actually affect change and make those contributions. And, you know, the ripple effects we'll never know, but they are real and it is worthwhile doing them. Yeah, that's all I'll say.
Will the treaty endure beyond the specific treaty legislation? Do you see this as being this living document that will evolve over future generations?
I hope so. Yeah, that's the aspiration, and that's why we've tried to describe it as that first statewide treaty, because it was a key learning actually from overseas. And I think that's also a critical part of the story to tell here in Victoria, that whilst we do often pride ourselves as Victorians as leading the way, that we're well advanced of all the other jurisdictions, we're just catching up in terms of other Commonwealth countries around the world. They already have treaties with their First Peoples and have had for decades. And one of the key learnings we got from looking at our brothers and sisters, First Peoples across the globe, was sometimes they had tried to capture everything in that one treaty, and that can have its benefits, but it can also have some downsides. And so that was a key lesson for us, to not try and achieve everything in just this one treaty. And so deliberately set it out that there will be these traditional owner treaties over there, that's their process. There's this process led by the First Peoples Assembly for this first statewide treaty, and it then enables that relationship to continue, to adapt and evolve, because our aspirations that we have now is based on where we've just come from. In 20 years' time, the aspirations of our people will be different again based on where we've come from. And the ability to continue to negotiate and have those relationships and improve the work that we are doing is really, really critical. That it's not just done and dusted, it's an ongoing relationship through treaty making between First Peoples and the Victorian community. And there may well be that reciprocal part of that relationship too. There's probably key things that will come out of that relationship where we get learnings from the broader community, and the broader community will get learnings from us, and that will feed into that treaty making process. So absolutely ongoing discussions, and it should be ongoing discussions within institutions as well. That treaty is not just about the Victorian Government and the First Peoples Assembly. That's a key part of it. But I think it's incumbent upon all institutions, including universities, to think about their role in this space, and to recognise that self-determination is not just an idea that has to be enacted through a treaty. There are other mechanisms to do that, and that they should be looking for ways that they can participate in that. And so I always encourage institutions that are wanting to be progressive, like the University of Melbourne, to think about how they can be actively participating in these processes rather than just sitting back and watching, but actually undertaking some self-determination as well. And that will evolve then also and influence those future relationships and future treaty making.
Could I just add on to that? And I guess look at the Yoorrook recommendations, and don't just look at the education ones that refer to universities. All those recommendations and our offering here at the University of Melbourne touches upon all those key areas, whether it be water. We do water stuff here, right? Oh, I know that, but you know, law, we teach law, or LORE. We need to be thinking about how we embed that. But one word I wanted to say that was a key part of Ruben's speech, but not the most important point, but NAM 2025. Does that mean anything to anyone? So in Ruben's speech in Parliament, he said many, many important things. But one part, he'd named all the treaties from around the world and gave their dates of the years that they were negotiated. And what are we in here, Melbourne? NAM 2025, we have our treaty. Just a direct quote from him. So, NAM 2025, make it stick, make it stick.
We've got time for one more question from each member of the panel. Travels, we'll keep it with you. Can you tell us how the new Truth-Telling and Dialogue Centre here will carry on the momentum from the Yoorrook Justice Commission?
Yes, great. Well, I better take my own words. So I think really getting around and meeting with a lot of people at the moment. So I'm in week 3, but I will use the Yoorrook Justice Commission as a foundation, as I've just said to you, about what the recommendations out of the 146 that we can look to influence across the organisation as well. So around curriculum reform, it's not just for years, prep to I guess year 10, I think it was, sorry. But we have a significant role to play in that. We naturally, obviously, will be teaching the future teachers of the world. And we should be also trying to be able to leverage our status as the #1 university. So I think that's an important opportunity. But really looking at the work and the building on the foundations that the likes of Professor Marsha Langton, has done at the university, but also many others around truth-telling as well. Uncle Jim Berg, I want to give a shout out to, not just because Ruben's on the panel, but I know a key marker point in 2019 when Uncle Jim called out the university about taking a really good hard look at themselves. And I think, so just recognising, as we do in our culture, the people before us, but also where we're trying to go as well. Another key priority for me is getting out and meeting with Victorian traditional owners. So I don't want to sit up here and say that we're going to walk away from other relationships with mob from right across the nation and internationally that we built, but really want to emphasise Victorian traditional owner voice. We can play a key role here, and I don't think we've done well enough, and that's being critical, but being honest and telling the truth that we need to do more as a university. And but some really good leaders that I've met with already that are really keen on that. But also returning our ancestors. You know, one of the big recommendations that I probably missed on, that was remiss of me, which was healing. We want to heal, but we also got a strong emphasis on not just waiting for the Treaty Authority to kind of work with the mob to do nation building or rebuilding, because colonisation ripped that apart, you know. Crystal was talking about the determination around native title, around Yoorrook. You basically have to show government that they did a really shit job of trying to get rid of you. Sorry about swearing, but it's factual. That's what you got to do. That onus test around that. You have to tell the government how bad you did about, you know, trying to, I guess, ensure that you have ongoing connection to that land and water as well. But yeah, so I guess, but returning ancestors is another key priority for me, and that's something that we also recommended at Yoorrook as well. You know, we've got a lot of our ancestors, but also secret sacred objects that need to be returned to the mob. There's no reason why we should have them here, and there's no reason why we can't play a leadership role right across the world in advocating for them to be returned. So that's what I mean by utilising our #1 status in this country to leverage off relationships right across the world to be able to do that. I can keep talking about this, but these just some of the other, I guess, key areas. But again, you know, we have blessing to be here today, and we also have the Dean as well, so of the Faculty of Law as well, which is another key part. And whilst we've made so much progress around having our people come through the area, but also what is our service offering around the legal teachings and offerings as well, about how we factor in and think about our LORE, our people's law, our people's customs and knowledge and so forth as well. What is appropriate to share, what is appropriate to teach. We'll need to work through those types of mechanisms, but these are some of the things, again, that we've heard from engagement and consultation with First Peoples right across the state when we were talking to them about Yoorrook recommendations as well. So, yeah. But it's an exciting time, nothing to worry about. You know, we don't have to be worried about truth. It's just telling the truth and how we own it and how we move forward together. We need to walk alongside everyone, work and walk alongside everyone to get the job done. And that's exactly the, I guess, the momentum that we want to create with people. We're not here to blame. Yoorrook wasn't about blaming, but it was about setting the record straight and articulating the true lived experience of our people here in the state. And many other states followed that same colonial process around the violence and so forth, and the systematic injustices that our people have faced. But our primary role was to elevate the lived experience of First Peoples here in the state as well. So look forward to getting around and seeing some of you, but also sharing some of the deadly work that we'll be able to build on. Again, we're not starting from scratch. We've got plenty to work from, plenty to pivot from as well. Well, look, 10 minutes.
Crystal, I take you back to the voice referendum on the 14th of October 2023, 2 years ago now. At the time, did you think, or did you imagine that 2 years later we would be in this incredible moment when First Peoples in Victoria are on the cusp of getting a treaty?
Yes, I did. I think that the treaty and the voice are really two very different things, and there was years of work that had already gone into treaty in this state. Not only the work that you're talking about, or I think everybody mentioned in terms of you know, ancestral and elders and generations before us, but also work in the Assembly and other places that have been going on for a long time through community consultations and negotiations and elected members and all of the rest of it. So yeah, I think they're really two really different things, and I think there is a danger in the conflation. Like, I freaked myself out before this panel looking at the news, and you know, there was an interview on a conservative radio in print about, you know, saying, you know, we've already voted on this in the referendum, and, you know, Victorians voted no and the rest of it, and trying to conflate the two, you know, constitutional referendum at the national level and then what's going on in this state. They're two very different things, and I think it's really important that we dispel the kind of idea that they are the same. I think there's a really strong community grounding in what's happening in this state, and the community wants it resoundingly. Though they're, you know, resoundingly, majority of people want this, and majority of traditional owners want this in this state. It's just really different, and the potential for change, I think, is far more radical and has far more potential than what was proposed in that referendum. But I think we've got to do our best to try and dispel it, because I think the Conservative right agenda is, using that as a way to continue to push mistruths about what's going on. So, yeah.
Thank you. And Rueben, we'll have the final question for you. What are some of the things that all of us can do to ensure that future governments uphold their commitments that they make in this space?
Yeah, that's a great final question. And I think we've touched on a few of the ideas around that already, which is make sure that you're amplifying the voices of First Peoples in this space. There's so much wonderful information out there now about this treaty-making process. Make sure that you're sharing that with your friends, your family, your colleagues. Amplify those messages and make sure that it's getting out there. Make sure that you yourself understand what it is that we are doing, and in that way you can combat that misinformation. It's hard to combat it if you don't know what the true story is, so make sure you do understand what the reality is of the situation here in Victoria and be able to combat that. But I think most importantly from my perspective is don't be silent in your support of treaty. Don't be invisible in your support of treaty. I can't tell you how much it means to me when I see our treaty t-shirts, when I see a car that's got the treaty sticker on it, when I see a shop that's got the treaty poster in it. It is so powerful to see that visual support. So just make sure you're out there and be loud and proud about your support of this treaty process. This should be something that all Victorians take incredible pride in, that we have this powerful treaty-making process. And the more we can see that, the stronger it will be.
That concludes our event. Just once again, I'd like to thank our panel. I have learnt so much. I'd like to thank my colleagues from Melbourne Law School, especially Lee and Elise, who helped with logistics. And it's wonderful to work with our colleagues from ANTaR. And it's so good to see all of you here tonight. Thank you.